Raftery and I'm a director with Projects RH. One of the questions we regularly get asked is, should we have board members or an advisory board? What's critical for companies going through their transition from being a small organisation to a large, or if they're having a generational change, is to have advice and assistance. Quite frankly, the difference between an advisory board and a board, and sometimes there's not much difference. At other ways, they are like chalk and cheese. Let's try to explain first what happens at a board. Boards are creatures of statute. They have legal responsibility. So the board is responsible for the governance of a company. Most companies, other than say the top 500 on the Australian Stock Exchange or the subsidiaries of multinationals, need to have members from outside their company to meet certain criteria. They want to get more information. So most boards consist of at least 3 people. There's normally the founder, a non-executive chairman, and a non-executive director. They have statutory duties, including they must oversee the financial stability of the company. So they regularly receive financial reports and they prepare budgets and see performance against budget. So the nature of a board is you have somebody with technical experience of the company, often the founder, an accountant or lawyer as the chairman, and somebody suitable to chair the finance committee or the audit committee. Now, in that mix, the chairman may be the mentor to a CEO. On the other hand, if you look for purely an advisory board, they may just advise on a particular area. So many schools and charities have an advisory board simply to serve the finance function. So what happens is someone like the chief operating officer of a charity or a principal of a school has a small group who act as a service team, and they deliver the school fees or the billings of the charity. What happens is the principal wants to focus on running the school or the charity, so that what they do is they appoint a non-board but advisory group called the finance committee or the advisory board. And what they do is they keep an eye on the money for him. They're not responsible. So the test of solvency doesn't fall on the advisory board members. And in my career, I served on the advisory board of an aged care facility. Now, the aged care facility was owned by a charity, but what they wanted was to have some other group, an advisory board, check on the performance and compliance of the organisation and report back to head office, because basically the charity had a number of businesses underneath it. So what happens in a boardroom that's different to an advisory board? Well, firstly, the advisory board quite often doesn't meet formally. What happens is that either the CFO or the CEO will periodically, or as the need arises, talk to the members of the advisory board. So he has an issue or an understanding he wants to get, he picks up the phone. Now, many large organisations that appoint an advisory board for a specific function, say a specific aged care facility, will want that group to meet once a month, check the accounts and tell them that all's going well. If this group was a board, they would have very different duties and responsibilities. As a board, they would need to ensure that the finances were being properly managed, that there was a compliance program, and that the company was solvent. So originally, if you go back to history, companies were formed under Royal Charter or a special Act of Parliament where they were given limited liability. That meant that all the money that was in the company was all that was available. People couldn't go to the shareholder and say, you need to put more money in. So with that came the concept of limited liability. The directors therefore were appointed to ensure that the company traded solvently. Over time, those obligations have increased dramatically. Now, boards of directors are subject to legislation, such as they must ensure they run safe places of work. They must ensure that they don't pollute the environment. They must ensure that their employees are treated fairly. These obligations have been transferred to the directors of companies personally. A member of an advisory board does not have any of those obligations. They are not personally liable. They may, depending if they're remunerated or not, be personally liable for the skill and judgment they use in delivering a service. For example, I was chairman of the Gold Coast City Council Audit Advisory Board. There were 3 of us, and our job was to ensure that the audit and financial processes of Australia's second largest local government unit were properly conducted. But we were not responsible for their employment policies, their engineering services. We were strictly responsible for the quality of material that went into the audit process. As companies evolve, therefore, they may start with needing an advisory board. And quite often the advisory board is a place where the founder or the original shareholders get to meet and see the types of people they want on the board. They then move towards appointing them to the board as the company develops. What's important is that the advisory board is a step for a company to get information it would not otherwise get. As companies evolve, they need to evolve towards the board model so that the outside world can see they have responsible corporate governance. Thank you and goodbye.